It's time for the Newsmaker Show on News Talk AM 1480 WLEA.
Monday morning, Brian O'Neill on today with an attorney and author. He's got a very interesting background. He's from downstate New York, and he's a lawyer and a writer. His name is Mark Torres. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Mark has got a book out. It's called A Stirring in the North Fork. Here's a description of the book. A fictional story about an out-of-work lawyer with union ties who stumbles across a more than 40-year-old unsolved murder in Long Island. The story takes place both in 1972, when the crime happened, as well as in the current time period, which I'm guessing that would be around 2015, Mark?
Actually, 2008, 2009, right after the Great Recession.
Okay. It's a thrilling page-turner about the brutal, unsolved murder of a woman on Long Island nearly 4 decades ago. Savoy, who's an out-of-work attorney, reconstructs the fragmented murder case and uncovers the truth. Savoy, he struggles to identify those responsible for the murder in this gripping and tragic tale about love, self-discovery, redemption, and a quest for justice. From the Teamsters website, it says, quote, Local 810 attorney, author's crime novel. Mark, first of all, where do we start? You're representing the Teamsters or the book? You tell us.
Well, I guess all in one. I've been general counsel for a Teamsters union here in New York City area for almost 7 years. Before joining as counsel, I was actually a member of the same union way back in a former life when I was actually an air-conditioned mechanic, a blue-collar grunt, who worked his way through school, worked and then attended law school in the evenings while working full-time and raising a family. And here I am today, years later, as counsel and now author.
And so you were a young guy working as a Teamster, and then you moved into the legal world for the Teamsters. Mark Torres, tell us, what made you want to write A Stirring in the North Fork?
Well, I've always had a love for writing. Obviously, now I write for a living as an attorney, albeit it's a bit formulaic in legal writing, but I do enjoy it. And the idea of wanting to write a compelling story was intriguing, and it was quite liberating to write freely from those constraints of legal writing. And I guess it ties into my past of having this innate drive to always want to search for more and do more and accomplish more. And this is just another one of those ventures.
Kind of curious, is this book, Stirring in North Fork, is it anything like the TV show Law and Order, meaning is it based on a real case with the names changed?
Not at all. It's a completely fictional story. The characters, and I think anybody who's ever written or ever writes any fiction bases it on some kind of intimate knowledge they may have or someone they've known or crossed paths with along their lives. So the characters have some spark through inspiration, including myself and my wife and family and friends. But the story is purely fictional, and it's set in this beautiful bucolic countryside of the North Fork of Long Island. If you haven't been there, it's a wonderful area. It's obviously not as chic as the South Fork, where the Hamptons and the more affluent folks are. The North Fork's much more laid back, a beautiful countryside and vineyards, and the kind of place people go to read a book. I just went there to get inspired to write one.
Tell us more about the book.
Well, it's as you indicated, did a good job. It's the brutal and unsolved murder of a woman, a domestic worker woman, in 1972. She was murdered way out in Orient, New York, and just buried in the nameless grave. And almost 40 years later, someone decides to kind of research the case. It was never solved. The story continues, and some of the shocking and interesting things you'll find early on is, as this woman is murdered, she has a very young daughter, and the harrowing part for her is to worry before she dies of what will happen to her daughter, and will she ever know what happened to her? And it moves through in and out of time from the present to and the past, culminating with the protagonist Savoy Graves trying to discover who was responsible for the crime.
Tell us what Long Island was like. Paint the picture of Long Island in 1972 for us, Mark Torres.
Well, particularly in the North Fork, the vineyards just started coming around in the early 1970s. Initially, there was just farming and crops. It was, kind of a depressed area to some degree. There's a lot of old money there. A lot of the families who've been there for many, many years who've been there. And then once the vineyard started coming to play, as years go on, it became much more affluent and much more of a desired vacation spot. But also people have second homes there. In some cases, they're primary homes. So it just kind of just takes through the area. There is the characters on Shelter Island, which is right across from the North Fork, and particularly across Greenport, which is where a lot of affluent people live there, including characters in this case that have very important ties to the story.
So North Fork, Long Island, you mentioned the vineyards. That's a big thing there. Wine production in that part of Long Island?
It is doing very well. It is big wine production. It's renowned, and it's really coming along. Obviously, from the days of early '70s when it initially was a rough start, it's come a long way, and happy to see they're doing work quite well.
Well, back to your legal work for a moment. Tell us, what is it like to be a Teamsters attorney down there on Long Island?
Well, it's great. I mean, I was a Teamster. I could totally connect with the members. Understanding what they face, having been in their shoes to some degree as a working man myself. There's not many attorneys who could say they're a Teamster with a law degree, and I'm proud to be one of them. And it's just very challenging work, obviously trying to preserve the working livelihoods of many men and women on the job and as they raise their families, and also negotiate fair contracts or better wages and benefits. And it's very challenging. We have about 3,500 members. I'm the only attorney there, and I love what I do. I'm driven by a passion instead of a fear. When I was in a law firm prior to that, there was a fear of making those billable hours, those dreaded billable hours there. You have to make those quotas, and this is an entirely different setting. It's much more you could really get into your work and enjoy what you do, regardless of the amount of hours put in, which in my case is quite a lot.
You're writing about a lawyer, but you're a lawyer too.
Absolutely. Obviously, the character you'll learn early on, he went through the things, obviously, what I've went through, being let go from a large law firm and kind of doubting everything you've ever accomplished and thinking you're not worthy, to kind of finding a new purpose. Which, as I did, he did as well. And in this case, the purpose was to kind of get involved in the case. It does border on the legal thriller aspect because it does have some legal procedural elements. For instance, it's a state crime. It's a state murder, and the lead character has a colleague who's a federal prosecutor who keeps telling him, we can't open this case, go straight to the local police. And he obviously has reservations about that because they whether they're going to get involved or not, or whether they actually were involved in a crime. And what he needs is evidence to enable his colleague to be able to open it under federal jurisdiction. So there was some legal elements in there, absolutely.
No, nobody likes somebody who wrecks the plot. Can you tell us more about the lawyer? Does he identify the murderers?
Well, I hate, like you, I'd hate to give away spoiler alerts. I do think that if you look at the time period from 1972 to now, it's conceivable that those who were involved would still be alive today. Possibly very active in certain areas and communities, and it really kind of just. And again, the whole book is written with the quest for justice. The reader screams for justice in this. It's almost as if, if I was reading it, I would look at the author and say, "You better get this right." I do hope that you catch these people if they're around to be caught, and really that's all I would be liberated to say without giving too much away. But it does keep you on the edge and suspense. It's an interesting mixture of suspense and compassion. And it just kind of rolls along and keeps you engaged. Any
Teamsters or union themes in this book?
No. The character initially, when he's let go, he's searching for other attorney jobs. And at the time, as you may or may not know, there were no jobs to be had. Thousands and thousands of attorneys were let go. The world was on fire. The economy was in the dumps. Lehman Brothers was closing, and everything was going crazy. So it wasn't much to be had for that at the time. So. There's not much more to be said for him to really look in the legal realm, so let me look at something else. And this turned out to be a quasi-vacation / research project for him.
We're talking with Long Island attorney and author Mark Torres. He's written a book called A Stirring in the North Fork. It's about an attorney who works on solving an unsolved murder mystery that's 4 decades old. We'll be back on the Newsmaker Show with Mark in just a moment. Back on the Newsmaker Show, I'm Brian O'Neill. We're on the line with Mark Torres. He's a Long Island attorney and a writer, and he's the general counsel for the Local 810 Teamsters Union down there in Long Island. On the Teamsters website, it talks, praises you. It says, Torres has a tireless work ethic, is dedicated to the labor movement. As a former member of the union, he now serves as his counsel. He relies heavily on personal experience to represent many members of the Local 810. He's a fine example of being part of the Teamsters family, and the Teamsters are lucky to have them on their side. Mark Torres, getting back to your book here, could you paint us a picture for those of us in upstate New York, who are not as familiar with the geography of Long Island? Can you describe that for us?
Sure. The easternmost part of New York City, I should say, is Orient, New York, and that's where the murder takes place. That's just about over 100 miles from New York City. About 25 miles west of that is probably the biggest town area, called Riverhead, Long Island, and that's basically the last bastion of big stores and big commercialism. Past that, back east, is really just a small hamlet. You have maybe a little mom and pop store, a candy store, things of that nature. Very small. It's very laid back, very tranquil, incredibly quiet and remote, and people enjoy it there. It's a wonderful place to live and visit. And, it's just these rolling hamlets along this countryside. It's just quite a beautiful, inspirational place to be.
Now, part of upstate New York is mentioned in your book, A Stirring in North Fork. Can you tell us about the upstate connection in your book?
Sure. During the investigation, the initial investigation of the murder, there was a police officer, a lead investigator, who was summarily dismissed from the case for reasons the reader will find out. And he relocates up to Deposit, New York. It's a small area, about 25 miles from Binghamton, New York, and it's just kind of a small, a quiet area, living in a trailer, just off the road to the backdrop of this beautiful countryside. The pine trees and the wildlife. It's just an amazing countryside, and he just resettled there. And the lead character, Savoy Graves, as he's investigating the case, he goes up there to interview this character. His name is John Conti, and he goes up there and he tries to get as much information from the case that he can. And also to find out why he was removed from the case and the force entirely. Initially, this guy John Conti was an officer in Brooklyn, New York. There was an incident there, also discussed in a book, that had forced him to really leave the area and go to the North Fork area. And a year later, he's embroiled in this new investigation, this murder of this poor woman, and then so a short time later is removed again. And the question is, why? Why is he removed? What's his status? And where is he now, and why is he there?
Mark Torres, 1972 Long Island and 2016 Long Island, or if you prefer, 2008 Long Island. The big difference, you say, is that economically it's a little bit better on Long Island because of the wine industry?
Oh, sure. I believe it's become much more of a grandstanding situation, although, again, not as chic by any means as the South Fork, with the Hamptons and Montauk and those places. It's still, from my opinion and many others, the desired place to be. It's just, again, a mixture of the countryside, the beaches, the wonderful settings, and the vineyards. And the people who live up there, I cannot or will not speak for them, how they feel on that. But I believe that the vineyards have helped, certainly economically. It's brought tourism to the area, and hopefully that can be filtered down throughout the local businesses.
Mark Torres, your book, tell us, how long did it take you to write it?
It took me 3 months to write, which everyone, by the general consensus, is that's incredibly short. And, and I'm often asked, how did you have the time to write it? And I remind them that I went to law school at night and worked full-time in the day. Writing this book was relatively easy, if you look at it that way. It took me another 3 months to edit and package the book and have it ready for distribution. And
did you edit it yourself? Just curious.
On marketing it. Yes, no. Well, initially, and then I brought on an editor to assist with the editing.
I was interviewing actually a former employee of this radio station. His name is Eric Griffith. He lives in Ithaca, New York, and he writes for PC Magazine, and it was asking him different questions about the writing industry in one segment that we were interviewing him on. And Eric Griffith told me that they have some very good computer programs that help authors write books. Tell me, did you use any of those?
I did not, although I'd love to hear more about that. It was, going into this was, I was eager, wide-eyed, even to some degree naive. I was immune to the limitations of publishers, and although that was a frustrating process in trying to deal with publishers and agents, and I kind of just, above all else, I enjoyed the writing. And I'll also point out, and this is very important to add, is that in collaborating with the story, my wonderful wife, Talia, we worked together on the story and conceiving it. We would bounce ideas back and forth. There were times we'd have vigorous debates over it, but it was wonderful to kind of create it with her in this project. And I'll tell you, since this book has been released, which is mid-December, she's saying, let's start another one, which is something, just need to get enough inspiration and a good enough story, which we feel can match this one. And we're getting there. We're working on something soon. That's
great. Mark Torres is the author. The book is A Stirring in the North Fork. Mark, tell us, what's the best way to get the book?
The book is widely available through Amazon.com. It's, you can get it on the print version as well as the e-reader version as well on Kindle. For more information, I'm available on Twitter at mtorresauthor1, and also my Facebook page, Mark Torres Author. And also, I'm proud to say that, if you type in a hashtag of Stirring in the North Fork in the Google search, I believe we've made an imprint already, and you'll see some information about the book, including my marketing ideas. And I've had friends, blessed with a lot of friends and readers who purchased the book, enjoyed it, and posted pictures with it. You'll see one of my colleagues from Kenya, Africa, to New Zealand, to people from all over the world, and also, of course, more locally, you've been posting pictures. I had a friend who was upstate in Hunter Mountain skiing while reading. Of course, I don't recommend that for your listeners out there, and I kind of will chastise them later as an attorney. Say, what, are you crazy? But it was really great to see people support the book and the story and enjoy it the way they do.
Mark Torres, the author, and New York City area, I should say, Long Island area, Teamsters attorney. The book is A Stirring in the North Fork. Mark, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And ABC is next on AM 1480, WLEA, Hornell, New York.